Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. In this episode, I'll be teaching you how to make these individual serve Christmas gift box cakes. Got a 4-inch cake here and I've scored a line around the outside and slowly guiding my knife through the cake using that line as a guide, that way it's nice and even. Do the same for the middle. And I've baked 3 4-inch cakes and that way I have 3 layers of cake for each 2 cakes. Placing a bit of buttercream onto my board to stick my cake on there. And then piping some buttercream in between each layer. I'm centering it, pressing it down, and then continuing until I've finished off all 3 layers. I'm going to press the excess buttercream up against the cake and pop that into the freezer to set for about 10 minutes. Then I'm going to add on the final layer of frosting. I don't bother doing a crumb coat when it comes to covering a cake with fondant. If I had the cake that's just going to be left with buttercream, then I would worry about doing a crumb coat. That's just how I prefer to work anyway. Then cover the whole cake generously with some buttercream and use a bench scraper to wipe off all the excess buttercream. So that'll give us a nice neat finish. Then using your spatula to bring that lip of frosting into the middle of the cake. And each time you go in with your bench scraper or your spatula, clean off that buttercream before you go in again. Then I pop my cake back into the freezer just until we roll out our fondant. If you get any air pockets or any kind of bubbles showing up, just pop them with a pin and press out the air. Then I rolled it out till it was about 1/4 inch in thickness, draped it over my cake, secured the top and the edges. And then to attach your fondant onto your cake, you grab the folds, you spread them, and you press up against the cake. And you do that around the whole cake. So what you're really doing is you're trying to get rid of those folds. So you're spreading the folds every time, pressing up against the cake until you reach all the way at the bottom. Taking the fondant smooth off the top and smooth off the sides. I like to do it before I cut off the excess fondant. That way it sticks to the very bottom of the cake. And then cut off the excess with a sharp knife or a spatula. And then smooth down the sides. If you have a little bit of that cake showing at the bottom, you can go up and down with your bench, if your cake smoother, and that'll get rid of that little edge. Here I've got some icing sheets that I've printed onto, took off the backing really easily there. Then I'm lining it up with the cake board, right on top of the cake board, that way it's nice and even, and using my fondant smoother to apply it onto the cake. The reason why I'm using a fondant smoother is because it presses out all the air and you won't get any air pockets or any kind of misshaping of the icing sheet. If you use your hands, you could get air pockets stuck in there and you get all these ugly folds. So it's a lot easier just to use your fondant smoother. And then we'll cut off the excess with the scissors and start attaching our lid. So I'm rolling out some red fondant. And this is for our other cake now that I've used a different pattern for. Moistened it with a little bit of water with a brush and then tipped my cake upside down onto there. And it's been sitting in the freezer, so it's pretty stable. We can handle it with our hands and it won't misshape. Cut it off right up against the cake. And then rolling out that excess again and cutting it into a ribbon. So I've got my ribbon cutter there. And I'm going to roll that up because it's the easiest way I find to apply the sides of the lid. Then tap it on your counter to make it nice and even and unravel it around the bottom of your cake. Cut off where it meets and just seal it off. Then turn your cake upside right again and just press in the top to make sure it's all connected. Do the exact same thing with your other cake. And here I've used white, just moistening the sides of my cake with a little bit of water and a brush. Then unraveling it around the cake and cutting off the excess. It's a bit rough there, but my cake survived. Now to make the bows. So I wanted the bows to have that print as well, so I just kind of cut it in strips, cut my bows, making sure they're all even, and then adding a little bit of water onto each bow and placing the icing sheet directly on top and just pressing it down to make sure it's attached. Then I'm turning it around to reveal the excess and just using a scissors and using the fondant as a guide to where to cut. And fold it over and add a bit of water into each side, press it in together and that'll make the fondant stick. and then a little section in the middle just in red to close off our bow. And turn it around and fold it in just to close that all off. And to create the bow shape, just rest it on its side. Open up those little bows and do the exact same thing with your other bow. And let it rest for maybe 15 minutes just to give it a bit more stability. And then doing the exact same thing now, but this time I'm just going to cut an inward pointing triangle to create the arms for our bow. And also cutting off the 2 corners just to make it look a little bit more realistic. Apply a little bit of water onto your cake, and then using your bow, sort of judge where it is that you need it to kind of stick, so it's coming out the center of the bow. Then add it onto the side of your cake as well with a little bit of water. And then adding a bit of water into the center to stick on my bow. For the very last step, I'm going to make some tags, and this is just wafer paper that I printed out, so it's still edible. Attaching it onto my fondant with a little bit of water and using my wafer paper as a guide for where to cut. I'm just using my spatula to cut it out. I later decided I didn't quite like the shape of that tag, so I just cut into a triangle sort of shape at the end and popped it onto the cake wherever I thought looked nice. And you're done. That's how you create 2 gift box cakes decorated as presents. With the icing sheets, it looks a lot more realistic, sort of like presents, because you get to use wrapping paper kind of patterns and textures. That's the beauty of edible images. These 2 patterns I bought from Spotlight, which is like a Hobby Lobby / craft store here in Australia. And I'll leave the patterns, the code for the patterns, in the description box below if you'd like to find these exact patterns. But yes, that was the tutorial for this week. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll catch you next time. If you like, you can subscribe to my channel. I upload a new video every Tuesday and Saturday.